Right, moving on to PHP. As we discussed earlier, PHP is a server-side scripting language created in 1994. It originally stood for the term personal homepage. It was too generic, so therefore they went on with something called a recursive acronym. So PHP, the word first letter P stands for PHP itself. So PHP hypertext preprocessor is the current meaning of the term PHP. So that's what it is. So as I've told you today, the web server is the one that is holding the PHP pages, and according to the user's request, it will process this. And then here, the final outcome of this will be sent to the client or the web browser or simply the user, right? So after processing this on the web server, the resultant happens to be a simple HTML code, right? Here you can see H1 means it's a heading one. Hello world slash H1, and then the browser interprets that in the form of a H1, that is heading one, and then basically displays the text hello world there, right? So here you can see the PHP tags are there, and then it says echo, and then within double quotations they have included H1 hello world and all that, right? So it's sort of sent like that. Some important facts to remember when using PHP. Now, for PHP to be experimented on and then to be able to study PHP, you need to run a web server, right? So always PHP coding runs on a web server. So we'll see how we can set that up later on. And PHP coding is always placed between these two tags. So we have an angle bracket, a question mark, PHP, and the closing tag would be again the question mark and the angle bracket. So whatever that is PHP in nature needs to be placed within these two tags, right? So PHP coding can be between, like, within HTML coding. That's not an issue whatsoever. But anyhow, if you do have PHP coding in your program or else web page, you do need to save it with the extension .php, right? You might be having HTML coding a lot. There might be a single PHP tag there. But if you do have even a single PHP like a statement, right, that helps you to basically customize your web output, then you do need to have it saved with the extension .php, right? Now all PHP statements do end with a semicolon, and also identifiers, we say that they are case sensitive in nature. By identifiers, you know now that variables, variable names, function names, and things that we define to be used in the coding needs to be they are simply case sensitive. That means, like, if you have say defined a particular variable called simple A, right? That simple A shouldn't be capital A in anywhere of the program. In the sense, like, if you mistype it in the form of a capital A, then capital A and simple A means, like, they refer to two different variables, right? So therefore, it's very similar to Python. Python is like all throughout case sensitive, but here identifiers are generally, in this case, case sensitive. Now, Uday, in any programming language or scripting language, we have something called comments, right? Comments plays a major role in that it sort of allows you to understand what the coding does, what the code does, right? So you might say, like, if you're just writing a code that is having about 2-3 lines, then of course, like, you might not need a comment to explain what you're doing. But if you're working on a code, where like you have about hundreds of lines of coding. Then like, for people who like other than yourself who would want to go through your coding and understand it, if you can have comments saying, okay, this part of the coding basically takes the user inputs and then assigns them to local variables, something like that. Then once the person or the reader goes through that coding, I mean, it will give them more sense about what your code does, right? Even like for yourself, the person who is actually doing the coding, after about 6 months or a year or so, like, down the line, when you sort of look into it, like, if you haven't described your variables and all of that properly, then you will have a little bit of a hard time understanding what you have done in the code. So it makes things more convenient and easier for the users to read the coding. That allows you to say like understand and figure out what the code does, right? So there are two ways that we can put comments in PHP. There are single line code comments, rather single line comments, where you can either start with double slashes and then say okay, whatever the comment that you would like to state there. So that's only strict or confined to a single line. If you want to sort of break it and put it to another line, then you'll have to start it with either the double slashes or else the hash symbol, and then you have to sort of put that line there. Or else if it is going throughout, it's a paragraph sort of, if it is spanning across multiple lines, then of course you can have the multi-line comment, which is starting with the slash followed by the asterisk, and then you can have any lines of coding, and then until it reaches this symbol, the reverse of what you typed earlier, that would be the asterisk and the slash. It considers all of that to be a comment, right? So sometimes during execution and testing of your coding, you might want to say comment out certain blocks of code, right? For you to be able to isolate a certain part of your program and to test it out. Then of course you can use this as well. But generally the idea of comments is to describe what the code does to a person who is going through the code. Right. So what you normally do is you have to download XAMPP. Most of you, since we have done databases, you might be having this. So you can basically go to the XAMPP server, download it. It's given from apachefriends.org. You can download the versions that is compatible for you. Say the Windows version. Let me just go ahead and click on this, and then it will basically download the application for you. It's just a simple installation that you need to do. I've already installed it, so you can basically go through. It's a simple installation. No, like it. What I would recommend is like during the installation, they will ask you an installation location. So let it be all default values. In that case, it will install the application to your C drive. So once you install that, you will see it's on the C drive, right? Somewhere over here, like the XAMPP folder gets created, right? So inside that, now the working directory. Now this XAMPP happens to be a combination of servers, right? So once you install XAMPP there, you will be able to get the XAMPP control panel. So what you do is go to start and say XAMPP control, and can see I'm running the servers at the time. So like it will be something like this up front. Then you can simply click on the Apache server. That's what we need at the moment. We don't need the MySQL server for the moment, but we will be needing it since we have some database activity as well with PHP. So for the time being, just this is enough. You can see that there are two ports that are getting opened that are being requested. Port number 80, which is HTTP, and port number 443, that would be HTTPS, right? So both the ports are requested, and then they are being utilized by the server. Now this is like your Apache happens to be the web server. You are running a web server in your own computer, the local computer, right? So you are hosting a server in your local computer. So that particular local server is actually called by the name localhost, right? So to basically access the web server, now since you have activated the web server, just to check out whether it works, you can on your web browser, you can simply check by typing localhost, right? So when you do that, you are now basically getting this web page from your own computer's web server, right? So it basically starts with localhost. And in networking, we have learned that the IP address range that allows you to access your own computer happens to be the loopback address, right? So you can even say 127.0.0.1, and it also basically refers to your own servers, web server, and then gives you the default page, right? So if this comes up, that means your web server is running perfectly well. Okay, right. Now, to do PHP coding, I will be using Notepad++. You can use any sort of a code editor. The ones that we went through earlier, say along with that some other newer ones as well, that's totally okay. So what you need to do is you simply type the code. You can see the coding starts with the angle brackets, the question mark, and PHP, right? And then for the sake of say structure, I've just put some indentations there, and say echo, right? And I've typed in this. Okay, just take a new file. So angle bracket question mark. It will look something like this once you basically start it. So as I've explained to you earlier, it needs to be starting with after the question mark PHP, and this is the end tag. So it doesn't give you the color code because I've not saved it properly. So I'm going to save it now. Now I'm going to save it to my server, right, which is in C, XAMPP, and inside the XAMPP folder there is a folder called htdocs. That is where you should save your files. So inside htdocs, I'm going to create a folder here, right? Say ICT class. Okay. And inside the ICT class, I'm going to save it as test.php. Or else here, let's go for the exercise 1. Exercise 1.php. So as I've told you, you need to save it with the extension .php. Now here in Notepad++, you don't have to worry about the type of it. It will automatically figure out based on the extension that I give. Can click on save. You can see it gets color coded. Yes, Alok, you can use anything. Sublime text is fine. Totally okay. It's very good actually. This one is also, since I've gotten accustomed to it, I'm just using it. You can use anything else, right? Brackets, sublime text, anything. Right, now I can place my PHP coding here. Okay, right. Now there are two ways that we can produce the output today. It's on page number 3. You can see echo and print. Even the print statements can be used in PHP. There is not a lot of differences between the two, but in PHP, the most optimized way of producing the output is echo, right? So I can use the echo statements. Echo is simply your output, similar to print in Python, right? Echo is the output of PHP. So whenever you use the echo element command, you have to give it give the actual output that you would like to wish to display within quotations, right? So let's say, for example, this is my first code in PHP, right? So that, and then you might recall that I told you each and every line in PHP needs to finish with a semicolon. So you have to do that as well. So I'm gonna save it. So this is it, right? So the first program here, and then to run this, it's not just about double clicking on the page as we did in HTML and CSS. So you look at that particular file and double click, it opens up in your browser. That's not the way to actually do that. I mean, let's just try that out for the sake of argument. Go to C, it was here, and in XAMPP, htdocs, ICT class, this is it, right? I'm going to open it up. So it's asking me to open using the apps. Let's go with Chrome. So let's go with this one. Right. So you actually get the same code, right? So what you have typed, it's not being processed. It's just simply producing you whatever that you have typed. It's not the way that we want it to execute, right? So this is not how PHP coding is executed. Rather, what you do is like through your web browser. Now you have accessed your web browser there. And then what you do is either with this or else you can simply type localhost. Okay. And say /. Now keep in mind that we have created a folder called ICT class, right? So I'm going to type that ICT class, put /. And inside the ICT class, in my web server, there is a folder called ICT class. That's what I've given there. And then inside that, I have my file called exercise1.php, right? Exercise1.php. Right. So zoom it in a little for you to be able to see. Okay, this is what I get. I just zoomed it in. It's not in H1 or something like that. It's just a simple text that I have given in my coding. So you can see only this part is basically sent to my HTML page. Now, if you just, for the sake of understanding, just go to the source of this page. Right, it gives you this, nothing, no tags or nothing, whatever. This is what is simply being sent to the browser. Understand? So now my client, which happens to be my browser, in this case, Google Chrome, and my server happens to be Apache, is also running on my computer. Both the server as well as the clients is basically running on the same computer. Understand, right? So this is what PHP does. So without the server part installed properly, now you should be able to understand that it doesn't work. Okay. So for the exercise 1 today, I would want you to copy this down. Okay. I'll send you the exercise files later on. I have that as a bundle. I will upload that as well, right? Okay, moving on. There are some escape characters as well. Say what escape characters do mean is like, for example, say if I want, say for example, this part, first quote, if I want to give it some, quotations, but if I put this, right, that's going to be a problem because sort of the echo statement takes this as the content, and then this becomes something that is not defined and all of that. So the outcome is going to be something of a problematic nature. So what you can do is like you can escape this in the sense, if I want this to be printed as a character rather than the end of the quotation, so what you do is you can put the backslash there, right? You can see that the rest of it, apart from this one is also having a problem. So I can put another backslash there. That allows me to sort of type it in the form of a character rather than the ending quote, right? So those are called escape characters. I'm going to save this again and refresh my output. This is the, okay. Right, so you get these in the form of characters rather than the quotations, right? So some of these escape characters we have used in Python as well. You might recall the new line character. So another way of doing that, let me just try this one out as well. Can use single quotes and a combination of double quotes, right? Here, you can use double quotes or single quotes, not an issue. So within the single quotes, when you have a double quotes, it will sort of take it as a character rather than the closing tag, because for the single tag to close, you need another single tag, single quote rather, right? So these two are basically considered to be the same, and they sort of stay the same from the previous output. Okay, so this is another way of doing that. Okay, right. Moving on to the variables in PHP. Right. So similar to Python, okay, variables in PHP does not require explicit declarations. Now, usually, Uday, when it comes to say a programming language, no, we didn't come across this. Even in Python, we didn't. We need to declare that a particular variable is a variable, right? For example, if you want, say, for example, I'll just take pad and for your understanding, right? Okay, say, let's take JavaScript, okay? So we can say, like, we need to declare that a particular, I mean, it's a variable saying var, a variable, and then say, say, for example, first name, right? That's it. So you need to end it with a semicolon as well in JavaScript. This is not in PHP, I mean, just for your understanding, right? Then thereafter, you can say fname equals to something like, okay, someone. Okay, so this is actually known as the declaration. And this is what is known as the initialization. So the initial value of the variable is set. Now, you don't need to do this. In some languages, actually, you have to say for example, in let's say Pascal, okay, say you have to declare that it's a string or a say, yeah, in this case, a string. Understand, right? So along with the data type. So that kind of declaration is not necessary in PHP. So you can simply go along with fname equals summon. So it will create a variable called fname, and it will put, I mean, decide or else figure out that the type of the data is going to be a string or a text or something like that. And then it's going to sort of save this content onto that location as well. Okay, so all of that can be done. Yeah, char is used for a single character. String කියනක තියෙනවා නේද? Yeah, in Pascal string is there. Char's applicability, char is simply there for a single character according to our idea. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that is what declaration is. So here you don't need to explicitly declare that variables in PHP, right? So there are some other factors that you do need to take into account. A variable starts with the dollar sign, right? So it's always starting with the dollar sign, followed by the name of the variable, right? Okay, starting with the dollar sign, you can have anything there, and but there are some restrictions. The variable name must start with either a letter or the underscore character. Can be an underscore, can be a letter, and it cannot be a number. Okay, similar to Python. A variable name can only contain alphanumeric characters and underscores. Only exceptional character here would be, apart from the dollar sign, obviously, we can have only underscores. I can have letters, capital and simple both, and numbers from 0 to 9, and underscores. Variable names are case sensitive. Age, right? Simple lettering age, that's what I told you earlier, and then capital age are two different variables. So along with that line, you can have some examples for variables there. Right, there's another exercise. Input your friend's name and say hi. Okay, so let's use that. Let's take a new one. Starting with PHP again. So I'm going to save this as exercise 2. .php. Right. Now, since we have not done the input boxes and all of that here, so rather than sort of letting the user input a name, let's sort of go with the hard-coded variable input. Let's say, for example, $name equals to okay. Now with the echo statement today, what you can do is you can say echo. You can produce the output there and say hi, space if you want to, $name. So what it does is it will basically take the value from the variable. The $name refers to the variable value called custom, and don't mind the single quotes and double quotes, it's not an issue. And then the word custom, that particular name, will be replacing this, right? So instead of just saying here the $name, it will put the value in place, and then it will combine the two and produce the output. Let's save it and go to exercise 2.php. Okay, right. So here the dot here happens to be the concatenation operator between the two. It basically combines the two string values and then basically produces that as the output. Okay, so this is for the second exercise. Input your friend's name and say hi, right? Okay. Now, even though type declarations and variable declarations are not necessary, there are data types that we use in PHP. They are being implicitly assigned. That means like when you assign a value, Yeah, Aloka, the inputs are usually taken in the form of forms, right? So you can create a form using a text field or something like that, and then basically whatever the user enters can be taken into the PHP script, or else you can use a JavaScript to basically sort of give you an input field and do that as well. So it's a combination of JavaScript and then PHP, or else you can simply use a text field to do that as well. So it has to do with form manipulations, how the variables are being passed and all of that. So we'll get to that level, but for the time being, let's just try to figure out the variables and the primitive stuff, right? Okay. So the primary way of inputting is through forms, right? Input to input data is through forms, right? Uh, So again, data types they are being implicitly assigned to variables. So whenever you assign a value to a variable, the data type will be automatically figured out by the application or the script. So these are the fundamentally used data types that we have. String can use both double quotes or single quotes. Integer, a non-decimal value between 2 billion, negative 2 billion to positive 2 billion something. Floating values are there, floats similar to um, Python can have fractional values. Boolean values are there, true and false. There can be arrays. Array is simply a data structure similar to tuples and lists that we have come across in Python, right? We don't have those sort of data structures in PHP, but rather the data structure here, what we have to use is something called an array, right? So an array is simply a type of a data structure which is capable of containing only a single type of data, right? So in lists and tuples, we were capable of containing names, values, floats, and other lists, all of that into the same list or tuple. But in this case, you can have only a single type of data. For example, if it is strings, all strings. If it is all integers, then all the data items must be integers, something like that. It might be null as well. That means nothing has been assigned to it, assigned to a particular variable. Can be a resource. Now, resources, they do come into our syllabus whenever we are dealing with a database. Whenever we request some information to be retrieved from the database, what we receive is known as a resource, right? So you can break it off and then extract the text or the values that you want to receive and basically do other computations with. But the content that is directly brought in from the databases are called resources. Right. Now, variable dump. That means like here what it implies is that now whenever you create a variable and assign a value to it, it will take up a certain amount of memory in your like space in your memory, and then basically like the values will be stored. Now you can see and get some information about the variables that you have stored, right? Now what you can do is like simply go to the previous output program. Now since we have already placed a variable called sname and it's holding the value kasun, right? Now let me just do this, right? Echo, right? For example, let's comment this out for the time being. Echo and say variable dump. The variable that we have here is in this case $name. So it's a function that we are calling today, so therefore you don't need to put any quotations there. It's not a string. So let me just run this and see. Right. Now it gives me this output. It gives me the type of data that we have stored in that variable, the amount of content. That means since it is a string, it counts the number of characters, in this case 5, and then it gives out the actual content that is being stored in that variable as well, right? So this is what generally the var dump for a string looks like. Can do the same with integers as well, and you will get like the corresponding responses, right? Okay, moving on to the operators in PHP. Now the majority of the PHP operators are very similar to Python operators, right? The arithmetic, the assignment, and the comparison operators are all the same. Now you might recall in arithmetic operators, we did addition, subtraction, modulus, right? Integer division, all of that are basically the same. And the assignment operators, equals, plus equals, all of that combined ternary operators are also the same, right? And comparison operators, greater than, less than, greater than or equals, not equals, all of those are the same as Python operators, right? But there are a few like distinct operators unique to PHP as well. So here, one is called the incrementing operator, right? Increments or decrement operators. There are two versions of increment operators, right? So we have plus plus and the $x, for example. Let's actually do something related to that. Take a new file with okay. Let's say that there's a variable called a, right, equals to 5. Since it's a variable, you need to start with the $sign. And let me just save it quickly. Save it as a operator test op test.php. Right, now there's a variable called a that equals to 5. That's fine. Now if I say, okay, echo, right, if I say something like $a plus plus, right, if I just do that and save it, and yeah, let's run this and see, right? This is called test rather. You get 5. Right, what happens is it'll okay, for your understanding, I'm going to just copy this and do another line, okay, without the incrementing part. It's going to reprint the value of a, right? So I'm going to save it, see what happens. Right, now don't worry about where they are being placed. Now in Python, you might recall, like whenever you put the print statement, it will by default bring the cursor to the next line. But PHP doesn't do that. With the echo statement, it simply prints the output, keeps the cursor there, right? If you want to bring it down, then you have to use a break statement and all that, right? Now, for the time being, let's just try to figure out what this is. $a plus plus, right? What happens is, with the echo statement, it will print the value of a, right, which is 5, and then it will increase the value of a by 1, right? And in the next echo statement, it's now 6. Now, therefore, what we get is the second digit that we get is a 6, right? Okay, so that means if you have the two pluses after the variable, that means it's known as a post increment, right? So that means you do whatever that you do with x and then basically increase the value of x. But if you have this sort of upfront, if you put the two pluses earlier to $A, so what you do is you increase the value of A by 1, and then here itself it will print it, in the sense like it will increase the value and then do the printing part, right? So if I do save it and say refresh, you can see it's already 6, and in the next value, next line, next echo statement, it's basically carrying the same value, and it will be 6. Right. I can do the same with decrement as well. So now you might be able to tell me the answer here. $A, which is 5 minus minus. That means we decrease the value of A by 1. So currently A is holding 5. So in the next echo statement, what happens is A will be 5. 5 will get printed here. Then it will decrease its value by 1. And then in the next echo statement, it will become 4, right? So if I save this and run it, you get this, right? And if I move this to earlier, like to make it pre-decrement, it will it will decrease the value of A and then print it. In the next statement also, it will print the same value of A, right? So those are the incrementing and the decrement operators. String operators, we have a few. We have concatenation operator. We have already seen how that works out. If you want to join two strings together, you can basically use the dots to combine the two. So for example, I'll take a new file. Let's have two variables in place. I'm going to save this up front. I'm going to go with the strtest string test.php. So I'm going to go with $fname. Plus one. Name. Pereira. And something like if you want to print both together, so you can say echo $fname dot $lname, and it should combine the two and print it, right? So I'm going to save it. Right, it combines the two, but you can see that there is no space here. If you do need the space, you can have something like this. A bit of a workaround, leave a space there, and then again combine this with a dot. Now this is a string, fname is containing a string, lname is also containing a string, and this itself, since it's with quotations, it's also a string. So it's basically merging all the strings together and producing the output. Okay. You can also say concatenate and equal. So it's a combination of the two operators, equals and concatenation. So for example, you can say, if you just comment this out, you can say $fname dot equals $lname. Okay, so then if you just simply say echo, okay, and then run it, right? So it basically combines the two together, because in this case I'm simply running this, right, producing the output fname. What has happened is, to the output of fname, so to the value of fname, lname gets added to it and then concatenated to it, and then it basically assigns it back to $fname, right? So now fname is not only containing Dasun, but it has combined Pereira to it as well, and then basically has gotten assigned to the variable called $fname, right? So yeah. There are a couple of logical operators as well, and or not exo, right, as well. So with in future sort of activities, let's sort of try to do that as well. So on to the third one: input two numbers and output the total and the average. Okay, uh, can be quite easily done. Let's do that. So you start with the PHP tag, can save it. That would be exercise 3. .php. Two numbers and output the total and the average. Fine. So let's start with the two numbers. Let's say $num1 equals to, again, like we'll have to stick to the numbers here itself. For the time being, we are not capable of taking in the user's input. We'll just go along with this, and then $num2 equals to something like 89. And then now the $total, you can actually do the calculation there and print it with the echo statement itself without having another variable introduced. Echo, you can simply say $num plus $num2. Okay, that would be one of the outputs. So if you want something like the total is or something like that, you can have that as well. The total, or else just simply say total, right? And then you do need to combine the two together like that. And then also you need to have a break statement as well, right? Now, since the final outcome happens to be an HTML output, you need HTML tags to basically move around and manipulate the content, right? So therefore, if you need the content to be broken down after printing the total, the average to be printed on the next line, you need to have a break tag, that what we simply use in HTML, right, to break the content down to the next line, because the echo statement does not do that by itself, as in the print statements in Python, right? So again, another echo statement saying average. Now we don't have the total with us, so therefore we need to again do the computation and basically calculate the average. So what we can do is do divided by 2, and yeah, that's it. So don't have anything else afterwards, and then we can close the tag, save it. size 3. Probably it's because of this. I'm gonna have another echo line here. Doesn't actually produce the total though. Yeah. Average works. Just brackets there might have out. Yeah. So basically it might have some issue with the concatenation and this. So shouldn't usually, but anyhow. So yeah, so we have a string that is to be connected to like a non-string content. That might have been the case. Anyhow, you get the idea. So again, like if you want to break the content, if I just comment this out, you can see that it's going to be in the same line. Okay. So just to have the separation between the two lines, we have to go with that. And then if you do go to the page source, right? I didn't refresh that. Go to the page source. Can see the break tag there, right? So none of the computations, no variables, nothing is there. This is what is actually being sent from the server to your local computer, right? So then essentially your computer or your browser has nothing to do with it, the computations or anything. The server is the one that is dealing with all the computations and all of that. And it's being the results or this is what is being sent to your computer. Right? So this is for the exercise 3. The fourth one, input the radius of a circle and output the circumference and the area. So yeah, let's do that as well. Okay, now here we need radius and we need to produce the circumference and the area, right? So I'm gonna take a variable called r, assign it a value. Let's go with 14. Save this up front. So it's size4.php, right? And then yeah, the computation. Let's say echo. You can actually use another variable to hold the circumference and the area. Let's go with C. 2 into pi happens to be 4.13. 3.147 times, or else you can use the 22 divided by 7 as well. 2 pi r. R is the $R. So you have the formula there, and then C, capital C, will be getting the result, the answer. We'll deal with the producing of the output later on. Go with $A equals to pi r squared. So you go with this. Pi times r, or else you can go with Python operators as well. To the power 2, right? R to the power 2. And then we can echo the outputs. Say the area is, and say go along with A. Right, and then since you need the break, echo the circumference is, and then you can go with $C. Okay, right, so this should work. Let's see. This is exercise for users. I'm gonna go with 4. Yeah, it gives us the answer. The area is 616, and then the circumference is also given. Okay, right. Okay, moving on to arrays. Right. Now think of arrays in the form of a list, right? So very simply, like it's very similar to lists and tuples. You can access each of these elements using something known as an index, right? So you can say an array stores multiple values in one single variable. So the array name, that is, here you can see how an example is given. Say dollar sub is given equals. This is how you basically initialize the values array, and you assign the numbers, or else in this case the subjects. Echo, you can see the concatenation being used. Along with, you can see how the how each and every value is being addressed to using the array name. Plus, it's very similar to Python. Within the square brackets, you indicate the index, right? And basically, you're capable of accessing those elements and then producing the output, right? Right. Create an array having 3 marks and display the total, right? Okay. So basically, after assigning the numbers, we can use the assignment as well, or else you can simply initialize it along with the marks, and then basically we can use that to do the computations. Let's try that out. That is exercise number 5. Start with PHP. Okay. Now we need to create an array with 3 subject marks. Okay. So an array looks very similar to the other variables as well. You start with the $sign, and then you basically give it a name, right? So I can say, just to indicate that it's an array, I'm going to start with AR and say marks, right? AR, just shorten it up, ARM. Okay, equals to, and you have seen it's actually starting with the word array, right? And then within brackets, I need to give the content. In this case, the 3 subject marks. We'll go with 78, 68, and 90. Okay. Right. Hope you understand. This is simply a data structure that is commonly identified by the variable ARM, and it's containing 3 values: 78, 68, and 90. And now I'm going to use the array elements to basically compute the total and produce the output. I'm gonna have a variable called tot equals to. Since I'm doing a computation today, I have to sort of exactly address to each of these values. So how do I do that? Using $ARM, right? And within square brackets, I have to define the element index. So in this case, you know that starting value is always having the index 0. So 0 refers to 78, right? Plus the other two values. I'm just gonna copy this. This is 1 refers to 68 plus 2. Now, for the sake of say, confirmation, like, as to whether this actually works, I'm gonna just, right, let that be the case, right? So let it be. Then I'm gonna echo a single variable and see, or value, and see whether it actually works, right? So I'm gonna say echo $ARM 0, right? Sorry, 0, and let's see whether it works. Save it. It's exercise 5. So I have a single echo statement, which is only trying to access element 0. It says 78. So 78 happens to be our 0th element. So it works, right? So I can get rid of it now. So now the total is now calculated. I can simply echo the results. Echo, say total is, and then go along with dollar tot. Right, simply the addition of the 3 values, right? Okay. Next one is exercise number 6. Create an array that stores 5 names, sort them in the alphabetical order, and print the names. So there's a program that I've already created for each of these. Give me 1 second. Right. Now see what I've done here. It's just an array called N, capital N. And then simply what I'm doing here is I've stored 5 names into it. Okay. So it should be simple enough over here. And then there's a function that we use in arrays called sort, right? And say $n, what happens is it will be sorted in the alphabetical order. It's somewhat similar to the function in list, right? Called sort is there. And then you might recall reverse and all of that, right? Some of the functions do apply onto this. I mean, it's according to the depth of the syllabus today, it's not very relevant to know all the functions, but I mean, some form of information is quite necessary. But let me just update you in the future lessons. But generally here, what happens is with the sort function, it will basically assign or else sort them, order them in the alphabetical order, right? And once that is done, you can say, now here, since we have not done data structures, I've just gone along with the simple traditional way. There are 5 names, so therefore it goes from 0 to 4, right? And then we just save it as XAMPP htdocs ICT class exercise 6.php. Okay, let me run it. exercise 6. Right. Now you can see it's not the same order that I have given the names. It starts with Saman and then Kasum. But here it starts with the letter D. That would be the earliest letter in the alphabet amongst the names given. So there are two Ks, right? KA and KA, and then it sort of follows the third letter just to make it in the alphabetical order, right? So M comes earlier than S, something like that, and then follows to the next couple of names, right? So now this is what I was sort of hoping to do today, because I don't want to overwhelm you with all this content. Let's just sort of gradually take this in. What I need you to do is basically install some form of a server, a web server. Now, namely, it can be what I'm using, XAMPP, might be WAMP server, might be AppServe, right? There are plenty of other server languages, packages, bundles as well. So it's easier, like, just using Apache, like, or else some other form of PHP interpreter, right? So you need to save it in either htdocs or www folders in your XAMPP or WAMP or whatever the server bundle that you have installed, right?